Okay, can we hear me now? I think so. Hello, hello, hello. Technical difficulties. I don't know if there was a volume on that entrance. It wasn't for me. It was not. But I now see that at least you can hear me, which is seems important as a YouTuber, you know. Anybody. Anyhow, what's up, Louis? Hello, me too. My too, I guess. What's up, Pia? Hello, Salad Fogel. Michael Askew, hello. How you doing? Jake Gelate is here. La Jate, so sorry. Hello, Dave. And Soy Daddy joined us as well. That's nice. Anik, hello. And Bianca. And I think, and Jason's here as well. There you go. I think I've named everybody. So, last week, we had a discussion about this article where, of course, I'm not prepared fully for it. Give me a sec. We had a discussion about this article where the claim is that that a slaughterhouse, a factory farm, sorry, not a slaughterhouse, is used as a metaphor, right? I'm guessing they haven't told us yet as a metaphor where, right? But it's used as a metaphor for what I'm understanding is, and when you want to show an anti-American sentiment, when you want to show like torture. So we're finally gonna get to the last part of this paper today. So, but I totally forgot where we left off. So I'm gonna try to find that, the last chapter. On producing consumers, let me see if we can remember. Anyways, we're gonna finish reading this paper today and see what the metaphor is all about, right? Discuss marketing and monopolism of junk food. One cannot help but notice how the factory logic is now in operation in the body of the consumer, converting calories into fat, advertisement into advertisements into capital. I don't know if I remember that part, but I don't remember where we ended, guys. A crazy amount of things happened since then. So let me real quick go to my channel and find out from last week. Sorry about this, guys. I'm, as usual, not incredibly prepared, but I want to see what the last thing we read out. So it seems that from jungle to nation is the next thing. 12. Okay. So we ended up here. We're gonna continue. All right. So from jungle to nation. So sorry, this is so unprofessional, but you know. The factory was not always such a central metaphor in American life, and factory farm is just one of a series of industrial metaphors that came to occupy American discourse around the turn of the 20th century. Anson Rabinback, in 1990, chronicles a variety of discourses at this time, figuring the body as a human motor, interesting, that could be managed and exploited to maximum efficiency. So I'm guessing that's how he talked about humans, and therefore the anxiety comes from there. Oh, so sorry. I'm gonna mute Discord. Mute. In contrast with an earlier period in which concerns about order and productivity were anchored in moralistic assumptions about idleness and character, see Weber, blah, blah, blah. Rabin back shows how these new industrial metaphors focused instead on the I'm struggling today, Jesus Christ, on the physical threat to fatigue. In this optimizing age of apparently unlimited capacities for industrial growth, the primary threat to social order and economic prosperity was not moral. Does Discord streamer mode only work for Twitch streamer? I'm not sure. I haven't interacted with it yet. I will try next time. I just mute the tab. It's fine. But rather physical exhaustion, because the one that the app is muted constantly, the only thing that is open and sounding is the one on browser. So I'm not sure if that exists, the streamer mode on the browser. Okay, but rather, Jesus, I'm struggling today anyways. In this optimistic age of apparently unlimited capacities for industrial growth, the primary threat to social order and economic prosperity was not moral dereliction, but rather physical exhaustion, right? That's where the factory farm comes in, right? Because the way I imagine it, right, the story, the story of the idyllic small farm where animals are happy and once in a while somebody touches their teats to also extract value, then translates into factory farming where the animals are supposedly overused and are like exhausted physically. Right, so it seems so far to be like a metaphor for the human being in capitalism, but I don't know. We'll see. The primary physical exhaustion. Ever since management and nutritional discourses have focused less on motivation and more on efficiency. The physical touchstones in this shift are John Harvey Kellogg and Charles W. Post, who were, at the turn of the 20th century, promising to cure industrial neurasthenia. What is that? No, neurasthenia. What is that? Neurasthenia is a medical condition characterized by chronic fatigue, nervous exhaustion, and various physical complaints, often linked to stress and lifestyle factors. Through a strict ascetic regimen of fiber, rest, sobriety, and animals that would attack the blockage of the typical American colon. Characterizing the body as a machine, Kellogg and Post developed and promoted foods specifically designed smoothly and efficiently to pass through the human digestive system, leaving behind as many nutrients as possible without obstructing and ideally a frictionless process of nutritional absorption. That's interesting. That's what they thought they should do. I guess a noble goal, right? To try and improve the human condition through dieting. This is also when Americans were first advised that food should be measured not by weight or bulk, but by how much energy it delivers. Yes. The popular bestseller, How to Live, Fisher and Fisk, 1915, we know now where Michael Greger got his idea for his books, was among the first texts explaining that a key to weight loss, physical efficiency, and general health was in paying attention to fuel units called calories. And we're still there. Around the time Kellogg was attending to society's upper crust, the United States also saw the release of what would become the undisputed zenith of 20th century food writing, Upton Sinclair's The Jungle. Okay. Sinclair presents a two-pronged attack on the American food industry, revealing how the pursuit of efficiency in the industrial slaughterhouse has created a food system that is both unsanitary and unconscionable. So it seems like unsanitary and unconscionable. So unconscionable, suppose applies like ethics, right? But unsanitary discusses the human well-being, whereas this discusses the animal welfare, shall we? The word of the year. In Sinclair's narrative, the meat industry profit off of not only dissected cattle carcasses. Chad is sounding a little vegan here, but also the spilled blood and destroyed muscle tissue of the workers in its factories. And destroyed muscle tissue, okay. Industrial machinery manipulates and actually mixes with human bodies. As workers do not just engage with machinery, they fuse with it. This is a metaphor, surely. Tools are wielded like prosthetic limbs, while knives enter and destroy the bodies of workers as well as cattle. Let me just straighten it up, just for people who don't like things not straight. In Sinclair's food factories, the line between fixed and variable capital in fluid, and in Sinclair's food factories, the line between fixed and variable capital is fluid, as is the line between producer and product, machine and commodity. Most memorable via the allegation that workers' bodies are occasionally rendered into and sold as lard. So I think it wasn't Chad sounding like a vegan, but Sinclair. Interesting. Shall we look who Upton Sinclair was? Obviously gone quite a long time. Upton Sinclair Jr. was the American author, muckraker journalist, and political activist, and the 1934 Democratic Party nominee for the governor of California. Wrote nearly 100 books, Jesus. But was he vegan? Let's see what AI says. Let's scrape the internet for the information that we actually want. Is often associated with vegetarianism due to the themes in his novel The Jungle, which highlighted the harsh realities of the meatpacking industry. However, there is no definitive evidence that he identified as vegan. He was focused on social reform and consumer rights. Okay. What can we expect? So, where did we finish off? Industrial machinery, we read that. Yeah, as the line between producing product, machine and commodity, most memorably via the allegation that workers' bodies are occasionally rendered into and sold as lard. So he's more talking about the workers than anything. Widely credited with inspiring the Federal Meat Inspection Act and the Pure Food and Drug Act, The Jungle is one of the earliest and most successful attempts to draw attention to the ills of industrial capitalism by telling a story about industrial food. If there is there was like some of the industrial food is fantastic for us. If there is a contemporary equivalent to Sinclair's muckraking report on slaughterhouses, it would have to be Eric Schlosser's Fast Food Nation in 2001, or perhaps Morgan Spurlock's film Super Size Me in 2004. I should rewatch that movie as a vegan. I saw it back then. Should rewatch it. Notably, these works each shift attention away from the industrial production of food towards its commercial marketing and consumption. Like Sinclair, Schlosser, and Spurlock, look at our food supply to show how concentrations of capital threaten individual health and freedom. But while Sinclair taps into an anxiety about this threat through the example of the industrial factory, Schlosser and Spurlock start with fast food franchise. That is, Sinclair looks at the food industry as a mode of production, Schlosser and Spurlock as a mode of consumption. Sinclair focuses on threat while we're working, Schlosser and Spurlock on threat while we're eating. In the 100 years between The Jungle and Super Size Me, the concerns about coercion and health were redirected from work to leisure, from the boss to the value meal. Yeah. I think the vegan community acts similarly because we do put attention on the person who pays and not on the person who produces. More so. Of course, millions, indeed, most Americans still work in factories, industrial, retail, and agricultural factories. And to be sure, Schlosser does write about the brutal and dehumanizing labor of farms, feedlots, and slaughterhouses. He also talks about McDonald's as a place where people work, not just eat. His descriptions of how food is assembled, certainly not cooked or even prepared, by robotic mechanisms, compressed carbon dioxide, conveyor belts, and automatic sensors are clearly intended to evoke the traditional operations and images of industrial manufacture. And the product, a small rectangular handheld frozen reheated apple pie, which is vegan, sometimes I think, is just one among many standardized manufactured commodities. Look, I'm still struggling today, guys. I'm so sorry. But from the opening of the book, it is clear that Schlosser wants to talk about how the fast food industry extends the rhetoric and techniques of industrial manufacture to figure not just the worker's body, but also the consumer's body as a machine. Where is the animal's body here? Where is the critique on the total destruction of the animal's body for unnecessary stuff? For Schlosser, it is how we eat rather than how we work that reveals our national spirit. And throughout the book, he deploys the familiar tropes of industrial manufacture to describe practices of consumption as well as production. In Fast Food Nation, it is both workers and consumers that are regulated by television monitors and computer software. And Schlosser characterizes the manufacture as well as the purchase of the consumption of fast food as a series of routinized behaviors and rhythmic actions. For Schlosser, the industry depends on not only the interchangeability of parts and workers, familiar from traditional discussions of industrial manufacture, but also the interchangeability of customers. In other words, he describes the fast food outlet as a factory in which both our production and consumption is subject to the principles of Taylorist management. I don't know what Taylorist management means. So, but I understand what they're trying to say here. They're trying to say that there is no individuality of the human being in those places, whether you are on the worker presenter part or on the consumer part, right? Everybody looks the same. One goes away, the other one replaces, and the product is the same, right? So very strong metaphor there that we could think about standardized food in general. Because there is lately like a bit of recurrence of the bespoke thing, but the bespoke thing is obviously more expensive, and so some people who have the capital move towards the bespoke, the thing that is unique, made just for them, or made with their aesthetic in mind, right? Even if it's not made for them, in comparison to the Temu, right? Most people will go to Temu to buy their commodities rather than to the one last shoemaker, right? Yeah, because like the capital disparity is so big. Schlosser's description of the technologies leading to the chicken McNugget technologies that turned a bulk agricultural commodity. What a terrible way to describe a sentient being. Turned the bulk of agricultural commodity, a bird, into a manufactured value-added product. Not only echo those of Harrison and Singer from a previous generation, but also directly parallel his description of Greeley, Colorado, a ranching community where cattle are the main units of production, where workers and machines turn large steer into small vacuum-sealed packages of meat. His character of Greeley is called, in an explicit nod to Sinclair, cogs in the great machine. And suddenly dawned on me, this is becoming like a revelation to me. And I'm sorry if you are not experiencing it with me, but this is becoming like an interesting path perhaps to take when it comes to like activism towards people who anti-conformists, right? If you show them the cogs of the machine, surely they are more likely to abandon it. This is very interesting. I'm like having so much fun. What's up, Martin, Kevin? How are you doing? So cogs in the great machine, and this chapter marks a shift in the book from talking about factory farms to talking about a modern day factory town. This term carries a double meaning for Schlosser, as he draws on the traditional meaning in which a town's livelihood depends on one particular business, and on the idea that the town itself functions as a factory with cattle and workers as the capital, and crime, poverty, drug abuse, and homelessness the end product. This is just like another thing that I'm thinking all of a sudden. The town or the region, I'm not sure how it goes, in India called Kanpur, a region that I talked about quite a lot on this channel, which basically throughout the years just dropped all other production because it became unviable and only focused on producing leather. So an industry basically came into the region or the town or the city didn't look like a city, didn't look too modern, and took over it entirely, to the point where if you now, right, like push of a button, abolish lever, the town has nothing to turn to, right? They would need like subsidiary help. They would need someone to take care of them, basically. So just this description really provided that vivid image for me, right? And actually increased somewhat my empathy towards those areas in the world where this one production takes over an entire town, to the point where, like, taking away that production leaves them with nothing. I guess we have like a famous example of like coal towns, that when the layoffs started, they literally had nothing, right? So I don't know. This is one of those things where I'm thinking, if we are creating a vegan world, we shan't forget the people that live in it, right? The communities that live in it. Yeah. Sorry to use the word, but intersectionalism is actually important in that way. Right. So Schlosser uses the same terms to describe what happens in the slaughterhouse as to describe what happens around the slaughterhouse, and to describe what happens at your local burger franchise, alongside the uniform and routinized actions characteristic of the fast food shopper. Schlosser uses parallel constructions to describe the actual factory potato farm, labor in an industrial slaughterhouse, the predictable shopping patterns of the American consumer, and the political machinations ensuring the profitability of these enterprises. In other words, Schlosser applies the industrial terminology to the animal's body, the farm that houses it, and the society that consumes it. As he proceeds to discuss the marketing and metabolism of junk food, uh, one cannot help but notice how the factory logic is now in operation in the body of the consumer. Well, it's because mechanisms are bullshit. Converting, well, they're not bullshit, but they're bullshit in 95% of the time. Let's just say it like that. Converting calories into fat and advertisement into capital. I'm really enjoying this paper so far. I hope you guys are as well. Producing consumers. This is a point that I've been, if that's what they're talking about, I think they are. This is a point that I've been talking about for such a long time, right? Those two sides of the same coin, they kind of feed each other. The farmer points at the consumer as like the catalyst for whichever production, including cruel production, and the consumer points at the farmer in many ways, in ways of please increase welfare, but here's the money for low welfare, in a way that they say, well, the animal is already dead, I'm just buying it. They again pointing at the farmer who creates this dead body, right, instead of taking responsibility for themselves. And in the supporter local farmers initiative that is like really widespread lately, also just giving this unquestioning support to farming, making them almost into like heroes, national heroes and martyrs, whereas it's just a job, right? No one should be like so fetishized for this job. Especially since sometimes that job is highly immoral, right? And I am talking about plant farmers as well here. Yeah. Sorry. So really interesting. So producing consumers, I think, would assume that would I hope, right? It would talk about the actual incentivizing of the consumer to buy. In this case, they will say junk food, right? The factory farm food, rather than I don't know, anything else, right? I don't know what they're going to juxtapose it with. I really hope not with small farms. This shifting side of concern from the industrial factory to retail outlet, from work to leisure, from production to consumption, reflects a shifting set of material realities. Uh, Michel, I think, Foucault? Is that Michel Foucault? Is that how you spell Michel Foucault? I've never seen it written down. I just heard the name always. So I'm guessing Michel Foucault's work on discriminatory institutions and human sciences can guide us through the first half of the story in Discipline and Punish from 1977. Foucault explains how teachers, jailers, and bosses confine, observe, examine, and exercise bodies so as to make them both functional and predictable. This is what he means by discipline. And this is exactly what we see in Sinclair's slaughterhouse. Workers are confined, observed, examined, and exercised so as to learn about, organize, and control their bodies. But it is less clear how much Foucault helps us understand the second half of the story, which is seemingly defined by a move away from panopticism to consumerism. What is panopticism? I'm pretty sure we checked last time, but I don't remember it anymore. Is a concept developed by philosopher Michel Foucault, describing a system of social control where individuals regulate their own behavior due to the possibility of constant surveillance. Oh, shit. Sorry, guys. One sec. I hope there's no SMR right here. What's up? So, big coops. Okay. So while Discipline and Punish effectively grasps the Taylorism ascendant in the early 20th century, it is less clear how relevant the book is at the opening of the 21st, when labor is increasingly casual, flexible, and outsourced, accomplished less by confined employees, evidence, and more by mobile temps, telecomputers, and independent contractors working from internet cafes. Yeah, I guess I would agree. I guess there is a little bit of a shift towards like working remotely is what I think they're trying to explain here, or working from the leisure of your environment rather than from a cubicle somewhere. Okay. In new business writers like Tom Peters, 1992 and 1999, this relaxing of the hierarchical authority of the traditional workplace unleashes the creative potential of employees and deserves to be described with words like liberation. I don't describe this as liberation, I'm not gonna lie. Like, I feel relatively liberated from working every day, 7 in the morning to 3 in the afternoon. I'm liberated from that, but I still have to work. I would consider liberation not working and concentrated on things that I want to do, I must do, I feel obliged to do, I feel incentivized to do. Yeah. But the idea that the causalization of labor throws into question the significance of traditional sites of disciplinary authority is not restricted to such bourgeois apologies. Hard, and I'm not going to attempt to read that, 2000. For instance, also argue that the declining significance of intuitions like industrial factories mark a break from Foucault's disciplinary society. Today, they argue because work does not happen in specific and enclosed spaces. It does, often. What do you mean? It just doesn't happen in like this very specific, a few, 2, 3, 4 sectors. But holy shit, have we heard of China? This is like a bit of a blind spot of Chad here, in my opinion. Holy shit. Today they argue because work does not happen in specific and enclosed spaces. Foucault's focus on the material organization of bodies on assembly lines in hospitals and in classrooms appears increasingly anachronistic. Foucaultian discipline fixed individuals within institutions. This still fucking happens, like to most jobs. This is like a little bit of, this is like a little black and white. Most jobs, people still go to a specific place where they're locked in that place for the entire day. They might get a break, they might not, right? Like I work in a hospital, nurses, they walk in and they walk out 8, 9, 10, 12 hours later. They are enclosed in one place and they go there every single day, right? The lucky work in 2 different wards and therefore they get to diversify their like workplace by just walking to a different floor or something like that, right? It's a little weird. And so only functioned episodically and in specific locations. Today, heart and, fine, I'll just call it Negri, all right, I don't know. See an increasingly smooth social space with less of a distinction between a work and at home. Yes, some, true, but let's add nuance. Where's the nuance? But they argue that this causalization of labor does not entail an emancipation from Foucaultian discipline so much as its intensification and generalization. I would agree. It's very hard to work from home. It's much harder to work from home than it is from somewhere else. It has its pluses and minuses, right? But like me, I have not so far been able to hold on to a job that is actually fully from home. I cannot concentrate. This is my place of fun and activism. And this used to be my place of fun and drinking, right? And so this has never been a place of work except for a few times where I had to physically motivate myself to do so. And so thinking about making this space also a space of work is would be like harder for me than to go into work, even though, you know, the travel and shit. Now individuals are monitored and regulated. We are not talking about factory farms anymore. Holy shit, we really departed from that. Oh, we're not talking about animals anymore. Now individuals are monitored and regulated not only when they visit the factories, schoolhouse, or hospital, but also in more prosaic and ubiquitous ways in their daily activities. Disciplinary power spreads across this space, with the result that coercive authority organizes subjects in the totality of their activities. So like there is no Yeah, I understand what I'm trying to say. Is like in modern days, like a couple of years ago, we were talking about a third place, right? As this concept of you have your home, you have your work, and you need a place of to go to have some kind of a leisure and like routine shedder. um, Whereas if you work from home and you also don't have this third, now second place where you shed the routine, well, you just have the one place. And so if this place becomes also work, the regulations on you basically have a job that regulates your home and you in your home. It must be hard. Put one in the chat if you work from home, and please tell me about your experience a little bit, because I I could not, you know. I have a bit of a weird congestion today. What's up, Fly Sensi? Hello, Marisa. How are we doing today? Okay. So, and become inseparable from their subjectivity itself. Whereas workplace supervisors previously amassed information and assembled data about individuals. Fly, since you work from home, holy shit! Tell me, how? How did it change your day life from working at a remote location? I would love to hear. Oh, are you just saying hello? Maybe you're just saying hello and not actually answering my question. Sorry. I'm a boomer. I'm not understanding the emojis. The emojis are so hard. Okay. Whereas workspace supervisors previously amassed information and assembled data about individuals and groups, today that information is collected by supermarkets, online merchants, and the internet service providers that track purchasing patterns and online browsing habits. That was another thing that I was thinking about while reading this. Definitely, for sure. It was an easy transition. Okay. That's good. That it was an easy transition. Surveillance no longer to the purview of industrial managers is, let me just put it in the middle because I wanted this to be pleasing for you guys. Managers is accomplished largely by privately owned surveillance networks that police both so-called public and so-called private space. Working from home affords workers less time under the direct disciplinary gaze of supervisors, but keystrokes, transactions, and phone calls continue to register locations, preferences, and behaviors. In other words, discipline, the observation, exercise, and examination of bodies that Foucault rooted in the confined institutions of work, school, hospital, and prison was shifted from our producer to our consumer activities. Zygmunt Bauman explains this in his observation that we now live in a consumer rather than a producer society, since the role once played by work is linking together individual motives, social integration, and systemic reproduction. Has now been assigned to consumer activity. This is again kind of, I'm sorry, I don't want to be sounding too leftist, but this is like a Western only angle to look at this, because surely we can understand that where there is consumerism and indeed over consumerism, there are people in fucking sweatshops, right, providing the West with that ability. And so if we're talking about the surveillance of the consumer, sure, let's talk about that, but let's not claim that people are no longer in Foucault's world, because they are. It's just like it's got split a little bit. The people in the West are less in those industrial factories, but the people in the East, the people who actually produce, people who actually allow this consumerism for us, they are like in Foucault, and I would claim like like a world of Foucault, but made more extreme, more of a cog in a machine than maybe not perhaps in the past, but perhaps in probably not like more than in the past, but I would say different. But we also know like very little about those places. So we know very little where and how the production actually happens, right? We know a few horror stories, and then the rest is hidden from us. The way the slaughterhouses, the factory farms, are basically hidden from us as well, allowing us with this, for the most part, absolutely mindless consumerism here in the West. So let's like not lose this, all the sides of the story, right? Sorry for my leftist TED talk here. Hence, in Fast Food Nation, the terms of factory surveillance and organization, especially in the opening gripping sections and in the rallying epilogue, are used to describe not how we produce, but how we consume. Brian Turner, cool name, in 1982 noted decades ago that the qualification and standardization of activities that Foucault discusses were becoming less visibly deployed in discourses of industrial management and more. I guess they're talking about America, right? So I'm rolling back all of that, right? I guess if there's like concentrating on the American perception, the American, if they're talking, it's just like not incredibly clear to me that they're not talking globally, because I can like, I guess I am like somewhat Americanized in my head as well, right? A lot of countries, a lot of people are, even though never been to America, never interacted with it directly, right? But if they're talking specifically about, if Chad is talking specifically about America and examining only America, then I guess, yeah, Foucault doesn't exist, or exists to a much smaller degree in America now. And Foucault has moved to the developing countries, I suppose. Yeah. I'm walking it back. I'm going through phases here. I'm on a journey to understanding this article. So discusses were becoming less visibly deployed in discourses of industrial management and more in the disciplinary discourses of diet and nutrition. Bodies, Turner argued, become useful and predictable, not because supervisors impose timetables and regulate coffee breaks, but because individuals track their own calories, carbs, and grams of fat. I'm not really understanding the switch here. They're making the claim that we are supervising ourselves now when it comes to our body. It's a little muddy in this area, in this part of the paragraph, in my opinion. Seems like an equivocation fallacy to me right now, but we'll see. More recently, Mark Grief 2004 has presented the ritualistic aspects of exercise, especially the systematic counting of times, repetitions, and heart rate as a set of forms of bodily self-regulation, which drags the last vestiges of biological life into the light as a social attraction. This reminds me a video that I saw today on Threads, where the intentions were great, right? The intentions of the person were great. There's this person in the gym, a man walking around and asking other gym goers how many hours a week do they work, right? To show then that no matter how many hours those people were working, they also always found time to go to the gym. And I was looking at this video and watching it and like seeing it from a completely different angle, because all the people that were questioned were men. And then the question arose, well, who's doing all the activities that they are foregoing in order to go to the gym, right? Because one guy said, I work 70 hours a week, which is an insane amount, right? By all standards. And yet he was going to the gym. And I was like, adding sleep to that, and then adding, like, you know, eating times, let's say, to those 70 hours per week. Who's cooking your food? Who's doing your laundry? Who's taking care of your kids? And to me, the answer is obvious. And like, I was like almost screaming at the person walking around in that gym, asking him to go find some women, right? Yeah. In other words, while discipline, so why did I think about that? So yeah, there's self-regulation, right? Like, yeah, it just like, I guess, just came in as an association. I don't see like a direct link anymore. In other words, while discipline was formally imposed, hierarchical and discrete, discourses of consumption from diet to exercise have regulated a form of discipline that is voluntary, democratic, and pervasive. Then comes in the theory of how much choice did they have, like actually, to become this disciplined, right? Because there is a structure to it that a person, in order to deviate, they must become like an expert in this. Right. My boss no longer watches me work and calculates how long it takes me to assemble a widget. But I tabulate my reps at the gym and monitor my own cholesterol, thus producing the same kind of knowledge about me. This metaphor is this juxtaposition is highly murky for me. I'm not vibing with it, I'm not gonna lie. I learned the inner truth of myself not by expressing myself in my work, but by seeing my consumer profile at Amazon.com. Oh, okay, I understand what they're saying. They're saying there is a shift of identity from the worker to the consumer, quote unquote, who's responsible through the consumption and through the self-regulation, are now valuing themselves in a different way, I suppose. Maybe. Hi, Joe, by the way. My position is cultural. Politics depends on not on my status as worker or owner, but my preference for NASCAR or lattes. This is surely why the factory metaphor travels to so many domains of life. The concerns about alienation and control that inhere in the metaphor are not anachronistic in an age of causalized labor. They are instead generalized to work, leisure, and politics. The distinctive marks of a consumer society are also visible in the changing face of wealth in the US. So they are talking just about the US, so that's great. Whereas Sinclair wrote at a time when wealth was generally generated through production, Schlosser writes in a historical period in which wealth is primarily produced through consumption. Today, major economic transactions increasingly take the form of currency speculations and investments. The issuance of credit is bigger business than producing machinery, and more wealth is produced by servicing debt than by engaging in productive labor. Indeed, consumption has become the most important type of production. Consumers are the most productive of producers, since consumers produce the most valuable of all commodities. Consumers produce debt, in which case Schlosser does not merely repeat the guiding assumptions of various anthropological studies of cuisine when he claims that our diet says more about our identity than our job. He asserts the defining feature of consumer society: it is consumption as much as production that creates value. That's very, very interesting. Okay, the juxtaposition is, I think I understand it now, right? Again, this is talking about identity, right? More than anything else. Okay. So, though Sinclair and Schlosser each draw our attention to different social landmarks, the former to enclosed institutions of production and the latter to dispersed practices of consumption, they appeal to the same anxieties about freedom and control. In Schlosser's book, The Normalization and Management, that inheres in the metaphor of a factory farm is distributed to each moment in the lifespan of industrial foodstuffs, from the engineering and harvesting of potatoes to the manufacture of homogenized desire in marketing boardrooms, to the deskilling of culinary labor in school lunchrooms, to the coordination of food traffic in retail establishments, to the consumption and storage of surplus calories in the individual bodies. Schlosser deftly applies the metaphor to the manufacturing plant, the feedlot, the mass society, and the individual body, and his book's popularity reflects a social condition in which no domain of life is immune to the disciplinary power of the market. The metaphor itself signals an uncomfortable yet seemingly unavoidable consolidation of the industrial and the organic, with the logic of industrial capitalism invading the most pristine of the romanticized of American landscapes, the family farm and the dining room table. I knew they're gonna use that thing. As ever more dimensions of daily life reveal this consolidation, we can expect the metaphor to continue to structure the increasingly politicized debates over food in the United States. Okay, we're coming to a close pretty soon, guys. So, do you want history with that? Whether emphasizing production or consumption, the desirable approaches to factory farming share a commitment to revelatory critique, implying that publicizing the hidden practices of production will inspire transformation in habits of consumption. Let me read this again. Publicizing the hidden practices of production will inspire transformation in habits of consumption. True that. And you can see it's not only in the exposure of factory farming, although a lot of it is like mid-size farming as well. You can see it in the seed oil war, where the quacks are using the images of olive oil production as to say, oh, look how terrible it is because it's produced by machines. as if anything else that they are actually promoting is not produced that way, right? So the image of this industrial production in the food system, right? It's incredibly strong, to the American consumers, especially, right? The seed oils thing is like started, I think, in America, where like people are like, oh no, my food wasn't just chunked off the cow. My food wasn't taken off the tree by a human hand. How terrible. Let me go find a local farm that does this thing that I'm imagining how food should be produced, right? In Sinclair, this means showing how sausage is produced. In Singa, how animals are tortured. In Schlosser, how workers are indentured and children exploited. Singer explains that he wrote his chapter on factory farming because the general public is largely ignorant of the suffering of these methods, of the suffering these methods invoke. Yeah, sorry. Schlosser's subtitle promises to throw light upon the dark side of the all-American meal, and discussing proposals to print pictures of cows' living conditions on packages of ground beef. Poland asks us to imagine how quickly this sort of transparency would force a revolution in our food chain, right? They assume mostly towards welfarism, which it does sometimes, right? People look at factory farming and they are like, as I said, running to find that small farm that supposedly doesn't torture animals, as we know. It's blatantly false. Books like Ruth Harrison's Animal Machines, Andrew Johnson's Factory Farming, and Sue Coe's Dead Meat include graphic images of factory farms and clearly operate with the presumption that if confronted with the reality of factory farms, the markets for their products will collapse. And yet it doesn't happen, does it? The idea is to create I'm not saying it wouldn't happen. I'm saying it didn't happen yet, right? The idea is to create what butcher journalists. How do those things go together? Butcher slash journalist Joan Muallam. Is that a pond right there? Cause digestive dissonance to upset readers' stomach, such that they rethink their taste for the products of industrial agriculture. Okay. These images from Sue Coe are really... Oh, look, she's calling it Factory PHARM, which is similar to what we call farmers. Sinclair famously captured this dissonance in reflecting on reception of the jungle. I aimed at the public's heart, and my accident, I hit the stomach. And by accident, I hit the stomach. Okay. Such appeals to digestive dissonance effectively push together the industrial and organic production and consumption in a way that illuminates the fallacy of the thing in itself fetish and challenges the unabashed presentism of global capital by asking the diner to have a healthy dose of history along with the burger. So the story is important to the consumer. As an analogic critique, they endeavor to connect practices of consumption with those of production, drawing attention to the easy-to-ignore social relations embodied in the ready-to-eat hamburger or supersized cola. They question the distinction between production and consumption by highlighting how, as Marx puts it, production is simultaneously consumption, since, for example, farming burns fuel, and consumption is simultaneously also production, since eating produces human labor power. The metaphor of a factory farm itself reveals this slippage, as its broad usage reveals how particular types of farming consume inordinate quantities of natural resources, how slaughterhouse and fast food labor destroys human populations, and how particular modes of consumption produce particular types of labor markets. But as Mualem, not sure, notes, the idea of revelatory critique as political strategy rests on the assumption that individual consumers will actually act on their digestive dissonance, and assumption that often sits clumsily alongside countervailing evidence. After 40 years of publicizing feedlot conditions, meat consumption is not down even among meat writers. Schlosser and Pollan, for instance, two of the system's harshest and most visible critics, admit that they continue to eat food from factory farms and that the relative affordability of such products all but ensures that others will too. Yeah. Similarly, the leaked video of deplorable feedlot conditions that circulated widely through network news and internet sites in 2008 inspired tremendous shame and indignation among the population, but do not appear to have significantly affected hamburger sales. Well, how do you account for increase in population? Right, you'd have to show both of those things simultaneously, and you would have to also prove that that burger wasn't doctored in that time, right? Because we do know burgers often add additives into them for bulk, right? To decrease the amount of meat in them and to increase the amount of other shit in them. Well, not shit. Sometimes it's soy, and soy is fantastic. Yeah. So in Johnson, 1991, for example, the section on economics is called practical choices, and the section on ethics is called moral choices. Lappy? Damn it. 1971. I really hate when I don't know how to pronounce her name. States that she writes about food because in an increasingly complex world, our food intake is the one thing we can control. Finally, somebody said it. Even in writing as thoughtful as and sophisticated as Schlosser's and Pollan's, the payoff in the recommendation to boycott the fast food industry. The payoff is a recommendation. Yeah. After Schlosser spends 270 pages detailing how food production practices are entrenched in an opaque system of international economic pressures, scientific pursuits of efficiency, ecological imperatives, and 100 or so years of unwise and corrupt public policy, he ends his book with a call to individual consumptive responsibility. Well done, and yet he himself doesn't do it. A good boycott, a refusal to buy, can speak much louder than words. Well done, how about you do the same? That's the definition of hypocrisy, because people keep telling us we're hypocrites, but no, it's not too late. Even in this fast food nation, you can still have it your way. This tragedy of responsible consumption dominates discussions of the politics of food, and it elevates the consumption of organic, local, or slow foods to the status of political action. I'm not sure that the move is correct in the correct direction, but that's okay. Whereas Sinclair's focus on the production of industrial food informed obvious political strategies of industrial regulation and union organization. The appeals to digestive dissonance put the burden on an already strapped consumer for paying more money for goods that make them feel better about themselves, and ultimately explains the marginalization of alternative farming as a function of consumer preference. If people wanted ethically or sustainably raised food, they'd head over to their local farmer's market or maybe Whole Foods and buy it. Well, what's the evidence that that food is more ethical? Really, truly, what's the evidence for that? Because because I just have like too much information altogether banging into my head. I don't even know where to start. But I've been banging about it for a long time on this channel. They typically fail to account for the myriad of obstacles to indulging digestive dissonance, obstacles such as the federal subsidies for large-scale farming that raise the relative price of organic and local produce, labor markets that demand reliance upon the quick and reliant fuel offered by fast food outlets, the comparative market advantage afforded to franchises over independently owned restaurants, the depleted tax base that encourages public schools to sell junk food on campus, and the efficacy of aggressive marketing campaigns in winning the hearts and minds of America's youth. If, as I have suggested, the factory farm is a pervasive metaphor because it corresponds to an experiential gestalt of powerlessness. Such claims that individual consumers can make a difference might seem peculiar, invoking an efficacy that is itself called into question by the metaphor. So I think what Chad is trying to say here, that it's peculiar to talk to a consumer about changing their consumption because the consumers are the outcome of the past years of factory production, right? They are the product of this. And so expecting them to change is peculiar, but then the other coin is, how would you expect the production to change in the same way, which kind of affirms my point that they feed each other. If we were to break that link between the two sides of the same coin, if we were like in some kind of way to split this thing, which probably what we're trying to do anyways, right? By showing a huge amount of factory farming production practices, we're trying to split this relationship between the producer and the consumer. If we don't do that, then everything is doomed. They just like feed each other. They're just like, how do you even change that? You can't do it top down because everybody will revolt, and you can't do it from the roots up because the people in the roots, the farmers and the consumers, they literally support each other so highly that there is almost no choice there, or at least an appearance of zero choice there, both on the consumer side and on the producer side. The question of the century, the question of our movement is here, right? Okay. factory farm is a metaphor because the correspondent to an experiential gestalt of powerlessness. Such claims that individual consumers can make a difference might seem peculiar, invoking an efficacy that is itself called into question by the metaphor, right? So it's questioning the ability of the consumer to break the cycle. It is this slippage between production, consumption, and politics, however, that renders the factory farm literature both so compelling and so distressing, forcing with such facility the realization of the untenability of the myth of the free consumer, while at the same time casting consumerism as political resistance. In a more severe idiom, calls for responsible consumption might seem like a simple false consciousness, blindly asserting individual empowerment as a means to avoid the structural dynamics preventing it. But as suggested earlier, we might instead see the turn of responsible consumption as itself a reflection of the real lack of opportunity for more conventional forms of politics. Drawing again on Bowman, if one of the hallmarks of consumer society is that social integration is facilitated through consumer relations, it should come as little surprise that Americans experience and understand politics in the terms of consumption. The appeal to digestive dissonance, I really like this term, is itself an expression of the experiential gestalt of global capitalism, and the literature offers not so much an end to factory farming as a promise of political power in the only place it can be conceived, the market. It reflects an experiential gestalt in which consumption is not only a central mode of production, but also the primary mode of social and political engagement. This is incredibly interesting. I think we can skip the notes. Guys, holy shit, this is blowing my mind and affirming it at the same time. I'm really loving this. I've really loved this. I feel like I want to read it again to solidify a few thoughts about it in my head. Maybe I'll just rewatch my own streams for that. Although I'm not the best out loud reader. What do you think? What can we conclude from this, guys? If any of you were like actually listening instead of talking to each other in the chat, I guess I can't expect that you don't talk to each other and listen to me. That's not why we're here necessarily, right? But I've really enjoyed this. This is digestive dissonance is a very strong point. I've really enjoyed this this article. I've really enjoyed it. Oh, VPM is here. Very nice. Sabi Coops, yeah. Checkmate vegans. Yeah, kinda, Luis, actually. Kinda, yeah. This makes our task almost impossible, something that I've been thinking about for a while now, right? Because you have like such a tight net system that is supported by so many things and prevented by so many things from changing, that I have a few ideas, but they are like outlandish ideas. For instance, if we turn a billionaire or two into ethical vegans, which is in itself a task that I think is impossible, right? But let's assume for a second that we take the Elon Musk of the world, one or two of those, right? Let's take one, and turn them ethically vegan somehow in an incredibly epistemically lucky way. And then, for instance, we ask them to specifically go and build their next endeavors in towns that are gridlocked into only producing beef or only producing dairy, right? And then when you give people the alternative, the question becomes, well, how many of them will stop raising cows and start doing an honest job for a living, you know? Yeah, I know. I mean, I would say that about all billionaires. It's epistemically impossible, in my opinion, to turn them vegan. Maybe we can start with some millionaires. Are there any ethical millionaires in the crowd? Probably not. Probably not. It's one of those things that people say, well, veganism is elite, is elitist, where most of us are fucking broke, aren't we? Most of us are broke thinking about how we're gonna pay for our next meal. That's not my situation, be assured, but I'm no a rich person either. And the people who are the actual elites will never go vegan. They don't have the epistemic capacity, the ethical capacity to do so. So, right. Bunny, what's that? Yeah. Right, guys, I don't know. I hope I've enjoyed this immensely. I do have a few ideas for the next couple of weeks of where we can continue our education. But I think I'm really enjoying reading all of those things that like add to my understanding of our task and of the world in general. So I appreciate everybody for coming to discuss things amongst yourselves while I'm struggling to read and shit. And yeah, thank you very much for coming. I really do appreciate it. It's very nice to see all of you always. And I'll see you next time.